So we started right after Christmas, actually. We started getting notifications from the Weather Service that there's a significant storm coming somewhere in the neighborhood of January 8th or 9th. We don't typically staff up for rain because we don't see rain normally around this area. We get 13 inches of rain a year, maybe. We've been in a 5-year drought, so we weren't expecting much rain. However, the National Weather Service said that it's going to be significant. So we started planning and having conference calls with the National Weather Service all the way up until January 9th, which was the day of the mudslide. So as we got closer and closer to that date, we started thinking about upstaffing our Type 3 team, management team, upstaffing jet skis, water rescue components, swift water rescue, the National Guard, which we never used. And we actually got a facility called Earl Warren where we normally do large fires. We started using that as a command post and base camp. So we didn't know how far forward we were leaning and didn't anticipate what was about to occur, but we did start the planning process early on to get resources and data. And that was the key thing, the data from what happened from the Thomas fire and the way it burnt the landscape and the potential for the water and rocks and boulders to run off the hillside. It ended up being a 200-year flood, which they were expecting 25 to 50-year flood, but this was a 200-year flood. So that's somewhat unexpected, that it was that much amount of rain. So the year before that, we had the El Cap mudslide, and it rained probably a half an inch of rain in an hour. On the Montecito mudslide, it rained a half an inch in 5 minutes, just to give you an idea. So we're looking at, California coast. We're right on the corner of Point Conception, and we could see on the 8th, that evening, that it was coming. But, at 11:30 at night, it was dry. There was no rain at all, but we could see it coming. So it came offshore through Point Conception and started working its way to the east in Santa Barbara. But typically what happens when it hits land, it dies out. So that amount of rain dies out. So the problem is the storm front split up. And when it split up, it went down to the Channel Islands and came up towards Montecito, which I didn't expect, nor I think any of the Weather Service folks expected, but it did. And when it came up, that's what gave us a real small window, but a lot of rain, in 5 minutes, a half an inch of rain, which is unprecedented. So it hit the area of the Thomas fire and just shot right down through the heart of Montecito. So we did a lot of planning and preparation, but looking back on it, maybe it wasn't enough. Interestingly enough, the call came in as multiple homes on fire. So we had all this swiftwater rescue teams with jet skis and rubber boats and wetsuits, and we have a fire. So our department sent 4 engines and a battalion chief to a structure fire in Montecito to help. What they encountered was the Highway 101 and most of the main attack routes to get up to Montecito have been blocked by trees, debris, boulders, mud, flow. That's what they encountered. Our operations chief, who was the lead in all this, went on the 101 through San Ysidro, turned around, and came back northbound and was hit by the mudslide on the 101. As he was hit by the mudslide, he went about 40 feet and had the wherewithal to turn on his four-wheel drive on his Suburban. He was able to climb over about 3 or 4 feet of debris, trees, washing machines, dryers, propane tanks, houses, cars, and was able to get over that and then turned right up San Ysidro. When he got up there, he opened the back of the Suburban to take command of the incident, and that was it. His Suburban died. It was full of mud. It wouldn't work. So in the dark, in the rain, with the back open, he started commanding the fire, or excuse me, not the fire. Well, yeah, there was a fire and the mudslide at the same time. So unbeknownst to us, the structure fires were started by the mud flow hitting a 30-inch gas main and exploding, and then literally catching 6 homes on fire with burnt victims that are jumping out of windows. So this was a fire that was started through a mudslide. So It was way different than we would normally go to.
Did you hear explosion?
No, I didn't hear an explosion, but when I was already awake because the rain.
The incident, I think we were on the incident from January 9th to January 22nd. So we knew it was a long-term incident, but yeah, you're just up trying to prepare. Now you're ordering resources that you would never think, like rescue task forces, dogs, canines, both live canines and human remains dogs, as they call it. So real busy, but we had a plan. We did mandatory evacuations the night before, so we got most of the people out. There were still some folks that, some chose to stay, some chose to leave, and then we did warning evacuations, but this thing went from the mountain all the way to the ocean, so we didn't know it was going to be that impactful. And then closing the 101, which is huge for us because we get all of our commuter traffic through the 101 from Ventura, LA, and then from the northern counties of San Luis right through Santa Barbara, Montecito, and that was shut down for almost, till the 22nd, close to it. Yeah. Typically in air operations, we fly underneath. We could fly at 500-foot level and below. That's safe, but because the ceiling had dropped down in pouring rain to almost 200 feet, our helicopters were coming in at areas where we would typically not take that assignment. But because we knew the magnitude of people and houses, somewhat to Katrina, except that was clearer in Katrina. This was underneath 200-foot ceiling of fog and rain, pouring rain. So we had pilots from the Coast Guard, Ventura County, our pilots that took people underneath 200-foot ceiling and were hoisting. And at one point, our pilot said while they were hoisting, I think they were hoisting 3 or 4, he looked to his right and the Ventura County helicopters getting ready to hoist on his right. Another Coast Guard helicopters coming in to hoist on his left, and another one went over the top of him and was hoisting with very little visibility. We didn't set up a TFR like we normally do on fires where we got everything set, everybody's coordinated. There's an air attack or a helco up that's coordinating the entry points and departure points of all the helicopters. The pilots were talking to each other on an air-to-air frequency, a Victor frequency. So there was no TFR or anything, which is very, very dangerous. So everybody would talk to each other and say, I'm off, I'm hoisting out, I'm turning left. So everybody knows that they were facing the mountain, they were turning left, and to make sure that you don't come out of your hoist and hit the other helicopter. So they would stay down where the other helicopter departed and then coordinate. So that was amazing. We did probably, I'm not sure, 30 plus active hoist rescues, and then at the end of that we did almost 138 hoist rescues that wasn't emergent. So we started just hoisting everybody, but we realized that we needed to triage people. So we'd hoist down and ask everybody, are you okay? And they said, yeah, we're fine, we'll just wait for ground forces to come in. So we'd hoist up, go to the next one with a broken leg, and we'd hoist them to the hospital. The rest of the people who weren't really injured, we'd hoist them or transport them to the Santa Barbara airport, where we set up a triage center with nurses and paramedics and ambulances. So if you were hurt, not really bad, you go in the ambulance. If you weren't hurt, then we'd put you in a bus, take you to Santa Barbara City College to meet with your family members, and the Red Cross had set up that as a shelter. Total, we had 34 dogs, and what we didn't know is the dogs were getting on the rubble pile and searching with their handlers. When they came in that evening, we would decon them with water, and the water was cold, so we were trying to figure out a better way to deal with them. So we ended up putting hot water in our decon unit, and that really helped the morale of the dogs. And the team that came in, the logistics chief, said it's the first time he ever had to order dog food for dogs on an incident. So that was kind of neat. And then he ordered 2 veterinarian services. So when the dogs came off the pile and they needed any veterinarian services, they went and saw the vet. Our dog in particular, Riley, had cut his paw open, and they were able to stitch it up. And the next day he was back out on the pile helping out. So probably the first 7 days was interesting because that's when we need the live dogs. After about 7 days, I met with the sheriff to decide when is that stopping point from search and rescue to search and recovery, which is a big deal because the sheriff's the only one that can make that decision. And when he makes that decision, we are no longer actively searching. We are now looking for recovery of bodies, which is a big deal for families. So that we had to get over. Like, when are we going to do that? So it was about, we talked about it at 72 hours, 96, and we actually extended it to 120 hours before we said we were going to do search and recovery. So at that point, the live canines would start to diminish, and we'd start ordering more human remains dogs for the incident, which lasted. It's still going on, and people are still searching. You know, I still got two people. I think a 17-year-old boy and 2-year-old girl. So that still continues today. So we ordered these high water vehicles, which we saw in Katrina, that could go through 6 feet of water with no problem. We ordered 3 of them, and each one of them had 30 people, and they did it for 8 hours. So it was almost 1,000 people that they rescued with 3 of those in an 8-hour period. It was amazing how much they actually rescued, the National Guard, including our engine companies, who pulled up and just saw someone going downstream and grabbed him as he almost got swept away. I mean, that was just happened to pull up. And the first thing he said is, "Have you seen my wife?" And so, you know, just stuff like that. People are just literally going right by you when you pull up at 4 in the morning. You know, you're not expecting that. You know, you're not expecting at 4 in the morning going to a structure fire and you're encountering this gigantic mud and debris flow that went from the mountain all the way to the ocean. And unfortunately, we found a body in the ocean. That's 5 miles away. And so you have to go over the overpass. So the 101 is below. In order to get to the ocean, you'd have to be on the overpass. Because if you were here, you'd go in the 101. So the person who got in the ocean had to have gone over on top of the overpass and then end up in the ocean, which is about 5 miles. It's a long way. So the magnitude and the velocity of that is huge. You know, there was creek beds that were 20 feet wide and maybe 10 feet tall. They're now 75 feet wide and 50 feet deep. So there's homes that are no longer there. There's no survey pins that you can go even find your house on where your property line is. There is no land, there is no house, there is nothing left. It's pretty devastating, you know. So they can't build because you're in the creek bed now that used to be your house. So it's really, I don't know how they're rebuilding, but I know they'll come back and rebuild and make Montecito beautiful again, you know.